Hi boys and girls, welcome to a splinter of winter, Fraction Wonderland. This is chapters 6 through 8. These 3 chapters are all about fractions, and we're going to start with adding and subtracting fractions that have the same or have different denominators. You might remember fractions from 3rd and 4th grade. If not, let's go over a little bit of vocabulary. A benchmark is a number that we use to reference what we're trying to do. So for example, if I had a number line here, my benchmarks might be 1, 0, 1, and 2. And then here I would note that I have 1/2. And depending on the fractions that you're looking at, 1/2 could even be a benchmark. Okay, so it's just a number of reference or a number that we look at to help us understand a fraction. Okay, like we know most fractions are less than 1. And now if it's a fraction greater than 1, then of course it may fall in this area here. We also need to know the difference between a whole number and a fraction. So for example, 1/2 is a fraction, but 0, 1, and 2 are all considered whole numbers. Because when we draw them, they represent the entirety of something. So for example, here, I could say I have 2 whole dots. Whereas in this picture, I only have 1/2 shaded, 1/2 of a dot shaded. These 2 are whole numbers, and this one is a fraction. We also need to remember the term multiple. For example, the multiples of 2 are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so on. So a multiple is the product that we get of 2 counting numbers. Like this number was 2 times 1. This number was 2 times 2. The 6 that went away was 2 times 3. So it's the product of 2 counting numbers. A fraction, we've already discussed what a fraction is. Here we have a fraction. It's part of a whole or part of a group. We know that in a fraction, a numerator is the number at the top or the number that is above the bar, and it tells how many equal parts of the whole are being considered. So right now we're looking at 1/2 of a whole. We're considering only one part of the 2 parts. Here we have the denominator, which is the number that is below the fraction bar. Equivalent fractions. You will remember that an equivalent fraction is a fraction that is equal, or fractions that name the same part. So for example, here I have 1/2. What is equal to 1/2? 4/8. Why? 1 is half of 2, and 4 is half of 8. These 2 fractions are equal because if I were to even draw a picture, you might notice that 4/8 looks the exact same as 1/2, and it's because they name the same part. Then if we were to write a fraction in its simplest form, for example, if I had 4/16, there is a simpler way to write that, and that would be as 1/4. And how did I do that? I divided the numerator and denominator by the same number. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 16 divided by 4 is 1/4. These 2 fractions are equal, but we're showing it in its simplest form. There's no way to simplify this or write it in lower numbers. A common multiple is a multiple that 2 numbers have in common. So I'm going to erase most of my notes that I've taken here with the vocabulary, and I'm going to say, oh, okay, how do I find the least common multiple? Let's take 2 numbers like 2 and 7. So let's list their multiples. We've talked about what a multiple is before. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. Let's stop there. And then for 7, let's write just a few until we find one that matches a multiple that we had for 2. So let's say 7, 14. Oh, we're ready to stop. Here we have the same multiple, 14 and 14. So the least common multiple, or a multiple that 2 and 7 have in common, is the number 14. And you'll notice that we need the least common multiple when we're adding and subtracting fractions. And then a common denominator. A common denominator is found using a common multiple. So if I wanted to add 1/2 and 1/7, I would need to first find a common multiple, which is 14. And I'm going to use that common multiple as a common denominator. And now that I have my common denominator, all I have to do is multiply the numerator by whatever I had to multiply the denominator by. Now you might be thinking, what did you just say? But it's actually very simple, and you probably remember it from 4th grade. So how did I get from 2 to 14? I multiplied by 7. So I'm creating an equivalent fraction. 1/2 is the same as 7/14. How did I get from 7 to 14 here in the second part? I multiplied by 2. So I'm going to multiply the numerator by 2. Now that I have a common denominator here, I can add these two fractions. So the answer of 1/2 plus 1/7 is actually 9/14. And this is the simplest form that I can have this fraction in. Okay, let's keep going. In this lesson, we will be using quite a few of our practices. We will make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. We will use tools appropriately and strategically. We have to always pay attention to precision. We will reason, and we won't really construct arguments and critique each other, and we will model our mathematics. Okay, Bethania and Zaya both purchased identical bottles of lemonade from the drink stand at the fair. Bethania drank 3/5 of her bottle, and Zaya drank half of her bottle. How much lemonade did they drink all together? Because it says all together, we know that our operation is going to be addition. And we need to add these two fractions together. How on earth are we going to do that? Okay, as you can see, I have my fraction bars here to help me solve. I do know that I have 3/5 plus 1/2. And we said we were going to use models to help us. These are fraction bars, okay? I notice that I have my fifths here, and then I have 1/2. In order to add these fractions, I need to find equivalent fractions that share the same denominator. I know that 5 and 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, we're finding the multiples, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. The least common multiple, so step 1 is to find the common multiple. The common multiple between 5 and 2 is 10. So my denominator is going to be 10. I'm looking for an equivalent fraction for 3/5 and for 1/2. So here I have 2 times 5 would have been 10, and 1 times 5 is 5/10. Now I know that 1/2 is equal to 5/10, so this is a good equivalent fraction. And now these two fractions are going to have the same denominator. Now I can multiply 5 by 2. That's how I got 10 here. So I have to do the same thing with the numerator. We have 6/10. Now we're going to rewrite our equation. We have 6/10 plus 5/10 equals 11/10. Now, we have 11/10 here as our answer, and this is a fraction greater than 1. But let's prove this out, okay? Here, we can see that 5/10 is equal to 1/2. I know that because the tenths cover 1/2. Now, I also know that 3/5 is equal to 6/10 because they're completely covered. Okay, so this is our model that proves and helps us understand the equivalent fractions and why we do that. Because if I have the same denominator, now all I have to do is add the numerators. But this is a fraction greater than 1. Am I able to simplify it? Can I break this in half? Can I break it in thirds? Can I make this any simpler than the way it's written? The answer is no. So we have 11/10. Can I write it as a mixed number if I wanted to? Remember, a mixed number is a whole number and a fraction. I think that I can. How many tenths are there? Well, we know that 10/10 equals 1. How many tenths would I have left over? Right. So 11/10 equals 1 whole and 1/10. My answer could be 11/10 or 1 whole and 1/10. And we can see that with our fraction bar. 1/2 plus 3/5 is 1 whole and 1/10. Boys and girls, here you can see that I've gone back to my problem and I've written the answer. Zaya and Bethania drank 11/10 or 1 1/10 bottles of lemonade because 3/5 plus 1/2 is equal to, here are our common denominators, 6/10 plus 5/10, and those are equal to 11/10 or 1 1/10. Be sure, if you need to, you can rewind the video so that you can see how we came to that conclusion. What about subtraction? Same process. If we were subtracting, we would still find the least common multiple, which we know is 10. So 3/5 is 6/10 minus 5/10, which is 1/2. And we would just subtract the numerators. 6 minus 5 is 1. So 6/10 minus 5/10 is 1/10. So how much more lemonade did Bethania drink than Zaya? Bethania drank 1/10 of a bottle more than Zaya. I'm going to pause the video and write all of that for you. So again, Bethania drank 1/10 more of a bottle than Zaya. Let's try a few of these together. Remember, step 1 is to find the least common multiple for the denominators. Step 2 is to do the operation. And then step 3 is simplify if we need to once we get the answer. Okay? What multiple do 8 and 4 have in common? Great, both of these have 8 in common. So 5/8 can stay the same, but we are going to convert 1/4, or we're going to, multiply the denominator by 2, and so we have to multiply the numerator by 2. Can you see how that works there? You probably remember this from 4th grade. So the answer is 7/8, and we're going to keep going. Why don't you pause the video and try a few of these, and then we'll come back. So here we've tried a few more. Notice that the answer to this one was a whole number, which is 1. Notice here that we changed the denominators to 10, and then 5 minus 1 is 4. 9 minus 7 is 2. Now it's your turn to try these two problems on your own. Pause the video and come back for the answer. Okay, here's the answer to the you do 7/10 and 1/6. Take a moment, check your answers. If you notice that you've gotten your problems wrong or you have questions, make sure you write them down in your square. And if your practice problems were correct, great. If you need to show that you're a level 4, go ahead and create your own problem. Thanks for watching.